Today I'm here in Turkey at the legendary Lüleburgaz Bike Academy. And if you don't know this place, it is incredible. They have accommodations, they have hot showers, laundry, bike tools, full kitchen, anything you may need, and it's all free for bike tourists who are passing through. But today I'm going to take advantage of something else that they have, which is this pretty unique bike loop. And I'm going to use it to figure out just how much slower I am when I'm fully loaded. The Lüleburgaz Bike Academy has a bike loop that's roughly 570 meters long. In each lap, there are two of these overpassing bridges that add up to about 8 meters of elevation per lap. The plan is quite simple. I'm going to do 12 time trials. Each time trial will consist of 2 laps, and in these 12, I will be rotating between loaded and unloaded setups. At the end, I'll compare times and try to figure out just an estimate of how much slower I am when I do have my full touring setup. During the time trials, I'll be following a set of rules. The first rule is that I'll be using a double alternate schedule between being unloaded and loaded in order to combat some fatigue bias. The second rule is that I'll only be pushing about an 80% max effort per lap. Due to some of the actual terrain conditions and some behind the scene touring conditions, I won't be pushing 100% max effort, but try to be consistent at 80. Number 3 is that I'll only be using the blue lanes. I won't touch any of the red lanes to get a consistent distance between each trial. And finally, the last rule will be that I won't start braking until I cross the finish line. And at that point, once I'm at a standstill, I will stop. This will show a more natural time when it comes to being fully loaded, because stopping and starting takes a lot more when you're heavy. But before I get into the results, I think it's important to define exactly what loaded and unloaded is. This is my baby, my Bomb Track Arise Tour, and at its base weight, it is about 14.7 kilograms. Of course, I have added a couple features and also thrown on some heavier tires, so it's sitting at about 17 kilograms at base weight. So that is its unloaded weight. Now, I also run 4 panniers, handlebar bag, 2 1.5 liter bottles of water, a 600 milliliter bottle of water, and a 20-ounce fuel canister when I am loaded. This comes in between 45 and 50 kilograms, depending on how much food I'm carrying. And at this time, it comes in right about 45 kilograms, which is a total of 25 kilograms more than its unloaded weight. So now it's important to see how much that weight actually affects me while I'm riding. With that being said, let's check out the course. Let's go over the final details and then do some time trials. Before we begin, I wanted to show you a little bit of what the course looks like. And here I'll only be doing 1 lap, while in the actual trial I'll be doing 2. As you'll notice, 2 laps is roughly about 1.14 kilometers or 0.7 miles, and it's about 16 meters in elevation gain per actual trial, so both laps. I do this total of 12 times, 6 loaded and 6 unloaded, and I broke these up into 3 trial sessions, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, and 1 the next day, 4 trials per session, and this was just to combat a little bit of fatigue, and so I have some fresh legs for each trial. Now, with this, I also created a schedule to combat fatigue bias, so I did a double alternating schedule, which you'll see a little bit later. Each lap, I did about 80% max effort. I wasn't racing, I wasn't trying to push too hard, just a consistent output in each trial. And I only stayed in the blue lanes. That's to keep the distance the exact same for every single trial. One last thing I did was once I crossed the stop line, I stopped. This is in order to kind of show the difference between weighted starts and stops throughout each trial. Last, we're going to look a little bit about what unloaded versus loaded means. As you see here on the left, the unloaded is significantly less at 17.9 kilograms or 39.4 pounds, while loaded, it's a little bit more. It's 45.9 kilograms or 101.2 pounds. And this is just an average. This has a light load of food, On longer days, it's going to be a little bit heavier, and when I'm around markets, it's going to be a little bit lighter. Now that we have a general overview, let's hit the track. Okay, so over the last day and a half, I've done my 12 time trials. Now I'm going to head back inside to my makeshift garage and see the results. So let's get right into it. As you see on the left, the first column is just showing the schedule. Here you can see a little bit what I meant by the alternate rotation. In session 1, I did unloaded, 2 loaded, and then unloaded to finish it. Session 2, I did the reverse, and then session 3, I did the original schedule. And again, hopefully this just alleviates a little bit of that fatigue bias. And right next to it in the middle is the actual times for each session. The last column is kilometers per hour. Sorry, there is not the imperial, the Queen's measurements there, but they will be shown in the results. But here you can see just how fast it was in total for kilometers per hour. Moving on, we're going to look at the actual kilometer per hour in comparison. This is an easier way for us to compare how much faster it is. Now you're looking at here, the higher the number, that means the more kilometers I do in the hour, and that is going to, of course, be faster when it's unloaded. So a higher number is actually a little bit better here. And let's look at the results. So for unloaded, the average was 25 kilometers per hour or 15 miles per hour with a completely bare minimal bike. Now, when we added all of that extra weight, it is reduced to 22.5 kilometers or 13.9 miles per hour. Knowing those totals, now we can finally see what the actual difference over an hour looks like. When unloaded is 25 kilometers per hour, average loaded is 22, so the actual difference is about 2.5 kilometers per hour or 1.59 miles per hour difference. That means that when I am unloaded, I'm going about 2.5 kilometers more over a 60-minute period. Now, it doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you think about me going for 8 to 10 hours a day while touring, that can add up pretty quickly. So if I am to do a full day's worth of touring, that results in about 20 to 25 kilometers or 12 to 15 miles more if I was to be unloaded, which is a pretty significant difference. And these don't really factor in the wind. Both of these days were relatively calm with the wind, although rainy. And I will notice a very big difference with the panniers and the bags catching wind as I go. So even on harder conditions, you're going to have a bigger gap between these differences. One final thing to note when I was looking at the data that kind of surprised me is if we throw up this chart again, you can see that both the unloaded and loaded first trial times are significantly slower than the rest, almost by 2 kilometers. In those first 2 laps, I was not comfortable or familiar with the course. I think this is important to note in regards to touring, because when you're touring, you're never familiar with your settings. You've never been on these roads before. You may not even be comfortable with the country you're in just yet. And this is going to also dramatically lower your times. So not only does the weight factor in, but from this, you can also see that the actual terrain and familiarity plays a factor in your overall speed. So overall, what is this telling us? Basically, what we already know, weight does make a pretty big difference. Over 20 kilometers a day difference in my case, which I like to average about 100 kilometers in total. So this is a big chunk. And it also pinpoints a little bit that wind, unfamiliarity, all of these things factor in for you being a little bit slower on tour. So even if you go out for your daily bike ride, you kind of now know it's a little bit different when you're on touring. The times that you get in your neighborhood versus the times that you get in real world touring situations are going to be drastically different, and that you want to factor in weight when you are planning. If you're wanting to hit big distances, maybe plan out food sources more periodically rather than stocking up, and plan out a lighter load. Overall, I don't think it gives us any big surprise, but it does give us a little bit of number to work with on just knowing how big of a difference it makes every day on tour.